What are the vinyl records in your collection that are worth a lot more money than you might expect? Let's find out today. Welcome back to the channel. Now, I recently came across an AOL.com article that talked about the surprising value of vinyl records that are worth a lot more money than you might otherwise expect. And my first thought when I looked at the article was, America Online still exists? But secondly, I wanted to go through this article and kind of get an idea of the records that are on this list that might actually have some serious value attached to them. And I'd be curious to know in the comments section if you own any of these records yourselves, and if you do, if you're interested in maybe trying to cash in. And if you're interested in reading this article yourself, I'll make sure to add a link to it below in the description. Alright, so the title of this article is 15 Vinyl Records Worth an Obscene Amount of Money. So let's see what we have here. Alright, so how about we jump right into what they have listed at number 1, which is the Beatles, The White Album from 1968. This edition, with the coveted serial number of 00000001, was the first copy ever produced and was originally owned by Beatles drummer Ringo Starr. In 2015, it sold for over $790,000 at auction. Its value comes from being both a low-numbered pressing and a unique part of Beatles history. If you own a copy signed by all band members, it would be worth even more. So wow, $790,000, that's a lot of money. I actually looked a little bit more into it, and it looks like it actually sold technically for $650,000, but with the buyer's premium attached when it comes to the auction, it ultimately came to $790,000. It also looks like the previous record for an album being sold was a Elvis Presley acetate, which I think went for about, what was it? $305,000. So that's, if you had that album, you were getting some money. So let's move on to number 2 here. This is a Queen album, Bohemian Rhapsody, 1978 blue vinyl pressing. This blue vinyl pressing of arguably Queen's most iconic single, Bohemian Rhapsody, was produced as a special edition for radio stations and industry insiders. Since only a handful of copies were released for promotional purposes, this album, in pristine condition, can sell for several $1,000s on resale sites like eBay or Etsy. In 2015, a signed copy sold at auction for $5,000. $5,000? Not too bad. Not too bad. If you had a record in your collection that you could sell for $5,000, I think a lot of us would be very happy with that. So let's move on to number 3. Elvis Presley, My Happiness, 1953. This record, which was the first acetate recording Elvis Presley ever made, sold for a staggering $300,000 in 2015. Highly sought after by collectors for its historical significance. As Presley's first known recording, it was famously purchased by Jack White of the White Stripes. $300,000, wow. Well, I'm sure Jack White's got the money. Alright, so number 4 here is Bob Dylan. The Freewheeling Bob Dylan, 1963, withdrawn edition. The initial pressing of this Bob Dylan record featured 4 songs that were quickly withdrawn due to licensing issues. But this rare version commands high prices at auction, with the album valued at over $35,000, according to Rare Records. Collectors value it for its unique track list, making it one of the most sought after Dylan records out there. This is really interesting. It reminds me very much of like the Beatles album cover, where it was, now famously known as like the trunk cover, but originally it had like the Beatles with like severed baby doll heads and meat and stuff like that. And so this is another kind of similar situation, and pretty cool. If you actually had it and were willing to sell it, you can make some money. All right, so let's move on to number 5 here. The Velvet Underground and Nico, acetate demo, 1966. This demo, which featured early versions of several songs that appeared on their debut album, is extremely rare. With only one copy known to exist, it sold for $25,000 on eBay in 2006. Its value lies in its one-of-a-kind nature and its importance in the history of alternative rock. One copy known to exist? One copy? That's crazy. Sometimes when I see these prices, as high as these prices are, sometimes when I see things like that, I'm like, only $25,000? Wow, one copy. All right, let's move on to the next one, which is a Prince album. So we have Prince's The Black Album, 1987. Prince, the legendary musician and pop icon, decided to withdraw this album just before its release, making original vinyl pressings of this album extremely rare and sought after. A copy sold for $27,500 in a 2018 auction. Very interesting here, another situation where the album's value is tied to not necessarily who owned it previously or if it's a signed copy, but the fact that it is actually kind of a withdrawn or revoked album. So I always find these stories really cool. Another one here. I'll be interested to see if there's more like it on the list. So let's keep going. So number 7 here is David Bowie, Space Oddity, 1969 gold disc. An original gold disc pressing of Bowie's Space Oddity from 1969 can sell for over $10,000. Collectors prize it for its extreme rarity, as well as its connection to Bowie's iconic breakout hit and its significance in his early career. With only 50 copies known to exist, signed versions or those kept in their original laminated sleeves can command even higher prices. So I think this one is also interesting, very much kind of like the Queen album, which was on blue vinyl. This one here is on gold vinyl, and I think it's pretty cool because a lot of collectors, especially probably new collectors, will just automatically assume that colored vinyl records that come in all these, extreme fun colors and maybe even have some swirls in it, that's all just sort of the moment. That's just part of totally the revival of vinyl, so to speak. But it's nice being able to actually go through a list like this and really notice that vinyl did occasionally come out on colored vinyl back in the day, and in a case like this, when you match it with a rarity of a record that was only pressed 50 times, or at least 50 are known to be in existence, that really will up the value and make the album all the more special. So number 8 on this list is Nirvana. This is Bleach, 1989 Sub Pop original pressing. The first 1,000 copies of Nirvana's Bleach album were pressed on white vinyl. One of these original pressings can command high sums, about $3,000, due to its scarcity and the band's later worldwide success. So yeah, another album here that was at least initially pressed on colored vinyl. It being white vinyl, very smart to do it with white vinyl based upon the album title being Bleach. That's pretty cool. And even though the value of the album was only about $3,000, that's still pretty good if you were looking to cash out and recoup some money. All right, so next up on this list is the Rolling Stones, Street Fighting Man, 1968. This is a picture sleeve. Only a handful of original picture sleeves were produced for this single before being pulled due to concerns over its imagery, which depicted police brutality. Because of this rarity, copies in mint condition have sold for over $17,000. Its rarity and controversial nature make it one of the most expensive Rolling Stones collectibles out there. So just looking at the cover of this sleeve here, you can really get a sense that this is more than likely an anti-war protest. And in just doing a little bit of digging, I came to an article on You Discover Music, which was talking about the song Street Fighting Man by the Rolling Stones. And they talked about basically how, the Rolling Stones had a lot of music that was, about heart and body and soul, but it kind of changed in 1968 after Mick Jagger attended an anti-Vietnam War rally. And it says here later in the article that Street Fighting Man was released in the US in August of 1968, right as protesters were clashing with police in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention. Some radio stations refused to play the song, worried that it would incite further violence, but while it didn't catch fire on the charts at the time, it has since grown to become one of the Stones' signature songs and has been featured in the set lists of many of the band's tours ever since. Alright, so next up is number 10 here, which is Fleetwood Mac. This is Rumors 1977, and this is the test pressing. This rare test pressing of Fleetwood Mac's Rumors album can easily sell for over $100 thanks to its status as one of the band's most popular albums. These early pressings, which were created to ensure sound quality before mass production, are considered ultra rare and valuable among collectors and fans of the band. Now, this is a really famous and popular and very mainstream album, so I was really expecting maybe there was going to be something extra special about this record. Maybe it was going to have a whole bunch of songs that were left off of the album, or maybe it was going to come in some sort of rare color, and something about it was going to make it have an inflated value. But as I can see here, only about $100. It's better than nothing, but as we've seen in this article, we've seen a lot better, a lot higher, a lot bigger values. Number 11 on this list is Frank Wilson, Do I Love You? Indeed I Do, 1965. With only 2 copies known to exist, this Motown single sold for about $31,800 at an auction in 2009. Originally intended for distribution before being abruptly pulled by the label, the album's rarity and status as a Motown classic have made it a rare gem among collectors of the genre. So another really interesting situation here where, like other records on this list, there was a situation where this record was released and certain people were able to buy it at the time, but then people in positions of power decided to pull the record for whatever reason, which now inflates the value of this rare gem that only a few people have. Alright, so number 12 on this list is Michael Jackson's Thriller, 1982 signed copy. While copies of Thriller aren't especially rare, signed copies are another story. The album's cultural impact as the best-selling album of all time further drives its value, with copies donning Jackson's signature selling for a whopping $20,000 or more. So here we have another situation where we have a very popular and mainstream record, and you're kind of wondering, okay, what is going to make this valuable? What is going to make this coveted and wanted on the secondary market? And of course, if you have an album signed by arguably the greatest entertainer of all time, there's a likelihood that the album is going to be worth a lot of money. Alright, so next up on this list is an album by Led Zeppelin, of course entitled Led Zeppelin. This is from 1969, and this album features the turquoise lettering. The very first pressing of Led Zeppelin's groundbreaking debut album had turquoise lettering on the cover instead of the usual orange print. Copies in mint condition can sell for around $2,000, with signed copies commanding much more. Its value stems from the rare misprint and the connection it has to one of the most famous and oldest rock bands in the world. It's really fun to see how many records are very valuable due to just small little changes that happen over the course of production. Things that can change naturally over time, or maybe for controversial reasons. Album titles can be changed, images can be changed, names can be misspelled, and in this situation we have the color of the letters on the actual album cover changed, originally turquoise, changed to orange. So if you own one of those and you're interested in possibly moving off of it, it's nice to know that you can maybe get a couple $1,000s. Alright, so next up on this list is the Wu-Tang Clan. This is Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, and this is from 2015. This one-of-a-kind album by the acclaimed hip-hop group sold for a staggering $2 million to an anonymous buyer in 2015. With only a few copies still in circulation, the record came with strict terms of ownership that included an 88-year ban on commercial distribution. You know, I completely forgot about this story, and at this point I think everybody knows this story, so there's really no point in getting too deep into it. But I mean, the amount of money that this went for is unbelievable, and then of course the controversy about the person who bought it and what he was doing and eventually what happened to him is just crazy. The whole situation behind This Wu-Tang album is absolutely insane. All right, and last on this list is Pink Floyd The Wall, 1979 early pressings. This version of The Wall, complete with puzzle-like artwork and original inserts, can easily sell for over $100. Collectors value these pressings for their connection to the band's early days and creative process. So after we've seen records sell for thousands of dollars and hundreds of thousands of dollars and a couple $1 million, seeing an album sell for only about $100 is kind of weak, kind of not too impressive. But if you have this album and you are looking to sell it, or you just really want to downsize your collection and this is going to be part of the actual bundle of records that are going to go on eBay or Discogs, it's nice to know that you'll be able to get maybe about $100 for this particular album, and that's really not too bad. So that's about it, guys. Let me know in the comments section below if you think that you own a particular record that holds some value, and if you do you think that you will ever sell it, or are you always going to hold on to it because you're a collector? If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button down below. I always appreciate it when you do that. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well if you want to be alerted whenever a new video drops. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video, and as always, stay devoted to vinyl.